Don't tell my current camera system, but I'm spending the weekend with the Fujifilm GFX100S. In this video, I'm going to be spending the weekend capturing landscape photographs to find out if this really is the ultimate landscape photography camera. The Fujifilm GFX100S, is it the ultimate landscape photography camera? That's what I'm going to try and find out, at least from my perspective anyway. But I got it for the entire weekend. Actually, it's the bank holiday weekend, so I've actually got it for an extra day. So I will have plenty of time this weekend to tell you all about camera specs, what it's like to use, and what the images are like that it captures. But I'm here at Dalwish this morning, so the first thing I'm going to do is to capture some landscape photographs with this 100 megapixel medium format monster. For my first composition of probably what I would classify as a classic Dalwish Warren scene, the thing that makes me interested in this particular composition are the elements. So I've got this sea pool here, which is left by an outgoing tide, and in there's a lot of rippled sand effects as well, and that gives a bit of texture within that pool. Got the groin that runs along the side there, out to that groin marker, and then out to the sea. Getting a little bit lucky, there's a few gaps appearing in the cloud now. It's just letting some of the light through, and that's given a little bit of colour to the underside of the cloud there. It'll be interesting to see how the files from the GFX100S process and how much of that colour I can actually bring out. I'm using the 23mm lens. I'm also using a polarizer. I'm not cutting out all the reflections, because then you lose some of that definition or contrast between the sand and the water. So I've just adjusted that just to give me a little bit of balance. It's a really nice scene. Take a picture again. The scene is constantly changing. I think once I've got this one, I'm going to try a few variations. Now that I've got my first picture in the bag, let me tell you more about what you can expect in this video. Like I said, I've got this GFX100S on loan from Fujifilm. I've got 3 lenses to use as well. Got it for the long weekend. And my goal of this video, I guess, normally when I talk about gear in my videos, it's normally equipment that I own and use already. So this is a little bit different, where I'm talking about a bit of gear that I don't actually own. But I am going to try and evaluate it from the perspective to find out if is this a camera that I would buy, or at the very least, is this a camera that I would aspire to buy? So, because I only take landscape photographs, I'm not doing some sort of comprehensive review video. So I'm not going to be shooting test charts and all that kind of thing as well. Don't do weddings, portraits, product shots. So a lot of things in this camera, things like image stabilization, super fast focus, frames per second, all that kind of stuff, probably not really of interest to me. So I'm only really going to take a view of this camera from a perspective of a landscape photographer, personally, from my perspective. But in this video, even if you don't have an interest in this camera and camera gear, I'm going to spend a lot of time taking landscape photographs, so hopefully there's going to be something in it for everyone. Let's talk about camera specs. You can't do a video on the GFX100S without talking about camera specs. It's a very hyped camera, and probably for good reason. Now I'm going to go through a few of the key or sort of headline specifications that are relevant to me as a landscape photographer. So the first one obviously is sensor size. This is a digital medium format camera. And excuse me while I read my notes, I never remember all this stuff off the top of my head. So that medium format sensor is approximately 68% bigger than a full frame camera. It generates 102 megapixel files, which are 11,648 pixels by 8,736 pixels. That's a whopping great big file. You can put it in a 16-bit RAW file. I've got it as a camera set currently for lossless compressed, and it's given me, I think, about 115 meg per RAW file. So big chunky files. Hopefully there's going to be lots of information for me there to process. Twin card slots, really important to me as well. Something I'm missing from my current camera system. I always like the reassurance of being able to write to the image to both cards at the same time, which is what I've got configured on the GFX. The other change, I guess, is rather than specification, it's more of a change from what I used to. My current camera system shoots 3:2 ratio. This shoots 4:3, so it's a little bit of a different viewing experience. It's got that large LCD screen on the top panel, which is I'm finding really useful. So you can look at what you're dialing in terms of shutter speed and ISO, or you can put in a really large histogram. I really like that actually so far. Now there's a couple other minor things, and I'll talk about those as I go along. The one question I do have for you viewers out there, and I'm sure there's a lot of you Fujifilm camera owners out there, not just those who own the GFX series. I'm really interested to know what customer service and support is like. Any buying decision for a new camera for me, I like to know that the camera manufacturer's got my back. How good, what the quality of that service is like. So whether that's just support or software updates, or if the camera's got a problem and you need to send it away, what's that experience like? So if you've had to send your camera away for repair or under warranty or to fix a problem, please do let me know what that was like in the comments below. Okay, that's enough of camera specs. Like I say, I'll talk more about some of the features as I go along. Let's get back to taking pictures. I've moved a little bit further up the beach, and I'm going to take some long exposures because I'm keen to try out one of the features that this camera has that my existing camera system doesn't have. And it's going to sound like the simplest thing that you would think that every camera manufacturer would have in all their, certainly the mirrorless models. And what it is, it allows me to dial in a shutter speed of longer than 30 seconds. Simple, I know, but when you take seascapes and long exposures, this is really handy. So I've got a neutral density filter here on, and I can just dial in the shutter speed that I want. And then, just to make life even easier, once you press the shutter button, a countdown timer comes up on the back of the LCD screen. That just makes that whole process a little bit easier. And I'm always keen on making the process of taking photographs a little bit easier. Time here at Dalwish Warren is coming to an end. I'm going to go home and have some breakfast and some rest. It was a ridiculously early start this morning. Gonna be hopefully heading out this evening to capture some more photographs. But before we jump onto that section, I'm going to show you some video from last night. I got the camera yesterday and decided to head up to Dartmoor to the River Dart to get some river shots with it. I did shoot some video and some stills, which I'll show you, but I decided not to shoot the intro for this video then because it's quite a noisy environment with the river. So I will see you later, but enjoy my pictures from the River Dart. Welcome to Holne Bridge, the River Dart and Dartmoor. This is one of my favourite locations to come and photograph, but I have to admit that's normally during the autumn months. This is because, as you can see, there's a lot of trees around here and the colours go really orangey and yellow and brown, and it's quite a show when you come here in the autumn. I've also photographed it in winter, and even when everything's bare, it's still a great location to photograph. But it's only this year that I started to come here during spring, when everything is actually green, lush and vibrant, that it's opened my eyes to the potential opportunities to capture images here. Now, I do have the GFX100S with me. You won't often see me sporting a camera strap, but when you've got a camera this heavy and this expensive, I'm not taking any chances. I've already had a little look up and down the river, picked out a few compositions that I think are going to be worth taking, so why don't we take a look at the first one. My first composition is actually one of my favourite compositions to take here at Holne Bridge. I've got this landscape orientation shot here, and what makes it different from the shots I was taking here a couple of weeks ago is there's a bit less water coming down the river, therefore it's exposed these rocks here, and what that means is the water comes rushing over it, creates some white water and some patterns around that rock. But what this also means is I need to be careful with my exposure duration as well. If I have the shutter open for too long, the water goes too milky white and I lose that texture and I lose some of those patterns. So I don't want anything probably over a second. I'm also using my circular polarizer, a critical bit of gear here for these types of shot, because that allows me to control the reflections on the water and in this instance really cut them down and also help saturate some of these beautiful spring greens that I've got. It's a really nice shot and I'm quite sure, well fingers crossed, I'm sure it will, but the GFX 100S is sure to make a good job of exposing this image. Press the shutter, let's play. I think that's looking really good. For my second shot, I've come a little bit further down the stream and closer to the bridge, and I've gone for a vertical composition. I'm going to point the camera quite far down because I'm going to pick out some of this detail here in the foreground rocks. It'll be really interesting to see how the resolution, how there's 100 odd megapixels, picks up some of the fine detail in that. And I've got the river flowing down there towards the bridge. All I need to do is wait for this big string of cars. You can tell it's bank holiday weekends, a lot of cars about, just for them to go by and I'll be able to take the shot. Okay, that's me got my first couple of shots with the GFX 100S in the bag. So far, so good. It handles and works like most other camera systems, so there's not too much of a learning curve so far. Now, I can't remember whether I mentioned down there or not, but I have been using the 23mm lens for those shots. I can't remember what the 35mm equivalent is, so I'll whiz it up along the screen there at the bottom. But we're going to head back to where I started now, and let's see what's happening at sunset. Good evening and welcome to Belstone Common on Dartmoor. If you've been watching my channel for a while or reading a lot of my blog posts, you know I come here quite a lot, but that is for very good reason. In fact, there's two good reasons. First of all, I feel quite lucky here. You know, it's not often that I come up here and come away with nothing at all. But I think that's largely due to the second reason, where it's just a fantastic place to shoot. I've got all these, I'm here in Irishman's Wall, I've got that interesting rock formation there, got the rest of the tour over there with all its broken rocks, and they create lots of patterns and shapes and textures. It's just a really interesting place to shoot. There's always compositions or variations of compositions to be had. And the other thing is it's got these big 360-degree views. So no matter where the light's happening, if you get light that is, no matter where the light's happening, you can point your camera in the right direction and pick out a composition. And I'm hoping to make more of my time with a GFX 100S up here. I've kind of been a bit limited, particularly at Dalwish Warren this morning. It was still quite flat, still quite a lot of cloud about. Did okay, I think, up at Holne Bridge because it was under the canopy. I did do some exploring of the moorland up in Dartmoor yesterday evening, but the light was just flat, it just wasn't worth it. And I really want to make the most of my short time with this camera, so I thought I'd come to my lucky spot. But before I get started taking pictures, let's talk a bit more about the camera. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, and that's the price. There's no escaping that this is an expensive camera. I know in terms of medium format, it's actually at the lower end of the market, but for most people, this is still an expensive camera. Let's start with the camera itself, the GFX 100S. The body is £5,499. I've also got the GF 23mm f4 lens, and that comes in at £2,399. I've also got the GF 32-64mm f4. That comes in at £2,149. And finally, I've got the GF 45-100 f4, and that comes in at £2,049. That gives a grand total of £12,096. It's a lot of money, there's no doubt about it. Now, I will talk about actually how I feel about that cost in terms of my own perspective when I come to sort of doing the conclusion of this video. But yeah, it's still pretty pricey. We talked about tech specs and costs, but what is it actually like to use the GFX100S? Well, if you're coming from a mirrorless camera already, like myself, it's pretty straightforward actually. You know, cameras are cameras really, and once you know what all the different menu options mean, it was really easy to set it up. I had to check a couple of things in the manual just to find out where the buttons were and how to assign some on-screen elements onto the back of the LCD, like the live histogram. But I love that histogram at the top of the panel at the top. That's really useful. But yeah, it's been even me, not coming from, I don't own any Fuji cameras, coming straight into this camera system, it's been quite simple to use. But there are a couple of things that I do like that I don't actually have in my existing camera system. For example, when the camera's in a portrait orientation, which I shoot quite a lot, you can actually flip out the screen, so it flips out in a landscape orientation and a vertical orientation. It's super handy. And the other thing, I don't know if this is handy, but I just quite like it. The lenses have manual aperture rings, so you know, and he's got a nice click feel to it as well. You know, it doesn't improve the process of creating pictures for any real reason. It's just a nice tactile thing. It's just, I quite like it. I feel a bit more connected to the camera. So yeah, I think, you know, if you're picking this camera up and you're already used to mirrorless technology, it's easy to use. I've not had any major problems. A couple of niggles, but I'll come back to those later on. I think it's time to take some pictures. That burst of warm light I got about an hour ago, it's not coming back, I don't think. That sun, yeah, it's stuck behind that bank of clouds about 5 minutes before sunset. It danced in and out for a little bit. I had a new composition set up, but I just didn't get the light, unfortunately. It's a bit of a shame, but it did give me the chance to put on the 45-100, and I took a few self-portraits. Why? Well, just for a bit of fun. I know I said I'm only a landscape photographer, but I thought, well, I've got the time, I'll try out the remote app. I took a few self-portraits. But I think my time here is done. Oh, before I go from here, I did learn a couple of new things. I managed to get focus peaking working on here and did some manual focusing as well. I really like the blue bar that appears at the bottom of the focusing line, tells you how much of the image is sharp, which I thought was really useful. So I am discovering new things about this camera as I go along. But I think that's it. I've got 48 hours now left of this camera, so we'll have to see what's happening. The weather forecast is a bit blue sky for the next couple of days, and what I'm finding is everywhere's quite busy. There's a lot of campers over there at the moment. There's been lots of people walking about the Tor, so I'm not used to it. I'm used to the isolation of Dartmoor. This is where Anthony come up in the evenings and the bank holiday, but it's nice to say hello to people nonetheless. But I'm going to pack up the bags, get down there, back to the car, and I'll see you when I see you. Hello and welcome back to Dartmoor, and this evening I've come to Emsworthy Tor, a location I know particularly well. I actually did a year-long photography project here where I photographed this location every month for a year. If you want to see how I got on with that, I'll pop a link up for that video in the corner of the screen. It also means a lot to me as well because that Tor and tree is actually the basis for my logo. On my way to Emsworthy Tor, I took a little bit of a detour round to a location known as the Red Barn. It's called the Red Barn because the barn's got a red roof. But what makes it interesting at this time of year is the fields surrounding the barn are covered in bluebells. So as I walked round there, I could see all the colours of these bluebells, the red roof of the barn and the green trees, along with the beautiful evening sun. I thought it's definitely worth taking a shot. So I got the 45-100 lens out, I think, and I grabbed a few shots. So let me share them with you now. back to Emsworthy Tor itself. Now, I obviously know this location quite well. I photographed it quite a lot, so I already know, I've already got a sort of preconceived idea of the compositions that I want to take, so I'm off to a bit of a head start already. Conditions here, well, you know, it's clear blue skies, bright sunshine, but I am at the height of the spring, so all the colours in the ground are looking rich and vibrant. The fact that there's no clouds in the sky, possibly not so much of an option, because I'll put the Tor on the tree towards the upper third of the frame, and I'll use the lower 2/3 for foreground, where there's lots of plant life and greenery and rocks and stuff like that. So I should still be able to make an interesting composition. That's the plan. Let's get started. Apologies, we've done a bit of a time jump. We're now at the end of the shoot. The sun has actually set. Now, the reason I've jumped forward a bit is I didn't do much talking, didn't manage to capture much video. This is because I was quite busy trying to get my composition right. I think just with the aspect ratio being slightly different and the lenses, or not having access to some of the focal lengths that I'm used to, I had to work a little bit harder to get exactly the framing that I wanted, but I think I managed to get it. So I was down there, camera in a vertical orientation. I was trying to get in the bottom 2/3, all that foreground, which consists of lots of rocks and greenery, and that was catching the light from the setting sun, so that looked really nice. And then the setting sun was also catching light in some of the undulations of the ground there, and out into the Tor and the tree. And as I suspected, having the Tor and the tree in the upper third sort of took away from the fact that it was just a blue sky. Right, that's it from Emsworthy Tor. I might just be able to squeeze in another location with the GFX 100S. We'll just have to see, but I'll see you soon. Welcome back. As you can see, I'm at home now, and I am sad to say that I've had to return the GFX 100S back to Fujifilm. A little bit sad to see it go, I have to admit. But I did say at the during the video that I would highlight a couple of the niggles that I had, and these are probably quite small things. So the first thing is to do with the physical controls of the camera, both the front and rear dials and the joystick. Let's start with the dials. I found them a little bit unresponsive. If you want to scroll through really quickly, it just doesn't seem to advance. So I'll give you an example of that. If I set up a composition and say the shutter speed's at 1/10 of a second, and I stick in a 10-stop neutral density filter, I'm going to want to change that shutter speed all the way probably into the minute. So that's quite a lot of distance to go to change that shutter speed. And if you do it really quickly, it doesn't seem to change the shutter speed that effectively. You have to be quite deliberate with your movements. Maybe it's just something I get used to. The other thing with the joystick, it's kind of a similar thing. If you want to scroll through the menus really quickly, it doesn't seem to be that responsive. You have to be quite deliberate with the down click or the up click, or the left and right. You know, a little bit frustrating, but probably something I get used to. The other thing, at the widest lens I had was 23mm, which is about 18mm in full frame terms. I kind of miss not being able to go wider. I'm kind of used to more about 14, 15mm in full frame terms, so it would be nice to have a super wide angle lens. And finally, I guess it's not really a niggle, it's just a characteristic of the camera, is the weight. You do notice it's a big chunky camera with big glass. It kind of reminds me of when I had my old full frame digital SLR. Now that I've moved to mirrorless and the body's slightly smaller, you do kind of get used to that. But then again, with this camera, you do get medium format digital sensor, so you know, you can't have everything. Right, I'm going to try and summarize my thoughts on this camera. Please bear in mind, these are my perspectives. Everyone's budgets and requirements are different. All I can do is talk about how I feel about this camera. Let's cut to the chase. Is the GFX 100S the ultimate landscape photography camera? Well, from my perspective, it's not a slam dunk. The differences between my current camera system and the GFX 100S don't appear to be that big. Now, on paper, the GFX 100S has it all. It's got a medium format digital sensor, so it's 102 megapixels, 16-bit RAW files. It ticks a lot of the boxes you would want to see from the ultimate landscape photography camera. But I've only had it for the weekend, and I think I didn't quite realize how much testing I would actually need to do in this camera for me to really get the most from it. I had challenging weather conditions, so perhaps wasn't creating the photographs that I would like to create with this camera. So maybe I haven't had enough time with it, but From my perspective, from using it over the weekend, it just doesn't appear to be a big enough jump between my current camera system and this camera system. As a camera system, the GFX system is amazing, but is it that much better than what I've got at the moment? If you look at a bottle of wine as an example, so you've got a £3 bottle of wine and a £20 bottle of wine. The £20 bottle of wine, for most people, will be significantly better than the £3 bottle of wine. But then if you go up to a £200 bottle of wine, is it 10 times as good as the £20 bottle of wine? Probably not. But as you go up those price scales, you get diminishing returns, or the gap between the quality starts to shrink. And I think that's what's happening here. Is like you've got a camera system that's 2-3 times more expensive than most other ones, but are you getting 2 or 3 times more cameras? I don't know. One thing I do know is though that because I feel that that gap isn't big enough, I'm probably not going to lose any sleep over not owning it. Don't get me wrong, I have loved using the GFX100S. It is a great camera and clearly capable of producing some stunning landscape photographs. Now, if you happen to have the money and, importantly, the camera skills to use it, then I'm sure you'd love it too. But for me, without having the opportunity to do an extended test with the camera, I'm just going to have to be happy with the memories of my time with the GFX100S. Okay, time to wrap this video up. In the comments below, why don't you let me know what you think about the GFX system? I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts. But if you've also got an extra few minutes, I'm going to pop up some links for some videos and some playlists. Why not check out one of my other videos as well? Other than that, remember to hit the like button, give the video a share, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one.